Welcome to the Essential Tax Podcast with your host, Mishkin Santa. In each episode, we'll take the complex world of tax, all the jargon, acronyms, and stuff that make your eyes glaze over, and explain it in an impactful way to understand the complex and unknown areas. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, thewolfgroup.com. Now, here's the host of Essential Tax Podcast, Mishkin Santa.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Essential Tax Podcast. I'm your host, Mishkin Santa. Today is a full circle moment for me, and let me just briefly explain that before I introduce our guest. It's been since the Texas State Bar Leadership Academy, that's when I was a young practitioner, probably I think 2013, 2014, when I started participating in a lot of conferences as an attendee. And I would say, then it transformed into me being a speaker. And I've been speaking at conferences since probably 2016, 2017. So over a decade now. And I can tell you I've seen it on both sides of the coin, but when you go to a tax conference, they're not as glamorous. First off, it's not that glamorous. So I'm not trying to make it out to be glamorous, but there's different kinds of speakers that will come up. There's some speakers that are, shall we say, they're more advanced in their career. They don't like to use slides, so maybe they have one slide, and then they talk like you're sitting at a campfire, giving you a story. And a lot of times there's valuable stuff in there, but it's hard to kind of pay attention to it after a while. There's some speakers that are super tax technical. I mean, we're talking about really smart attorneys and accountants, but they don't have a lot of flavor in there, and the brain kind of just turns off, and maybe you start doom scrolling on your cell phone. But they have great knowledge that they're sharing. There are some speakers, hopefully me, that have both the flavor and the technical and keep you engaged. You don't see very often because there's a special flair that you have to have there for that. And then there's some speakers that are not giving you, they're not focused solely on tax. They have a lot of different things they're going to talk about, very niche topics, and they can really capture the audience. And I have been to conferences where I've seen Henley Partners. That's who's technically on the podcast today. Chris Ott's the representative. But when they come in, the information that they're sharing and the topics that they're talking about, the room kind of just stops. The phones go down, the laptops close up, people pay attention because what they're talking about is relevant. It matters to your client base. It matters to prospective clients. This is stuff that is happening right now that they are monitoring, observing, helping out with. We're going to get into all that today. But I just want to give some background on today's guest and kind of what they do from my perspective. I think that anytime they're up there speaking and giving the insight that they have, I would highly recommend you stop, you listen, and ask, most importantly, ask questions because they have a wealth of information. And so with that, welcome to the podcast today, Chris.
Thank you, Mishkin. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's always great to be here speaking with you, and I know that you and the Wolf Group do a great job, so we're very happy to be a part of this.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that. So just for our audience so that they can get to know who you are, just some background. Can you give us your 30-second elevator speech on who you are, your education, your background, all that stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Connecticut, been living in DC for the last 5 years. And so I have a finance background, right? I have a bachelor's degree in economics. I have a master's in finance with a concentration in investments and securities. And I've been in this global residency and citizenship space for about a year now. And it's been going really well. It's super hot industry, right? And it's very exciting space for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Tell us about Henley Partners. I got to know the 411, as the kids used to say. I guess that's maybe from my generation. How long has the company been in business? How long has Henley been doing what it's doing?
Yeah, Henley's been the leader in global residence and citizenship planning for more than 25 years.
Okay. And maybe you have this, maybe you don't, but is there a certain genesis story about how the company came into being? To me, this is a very niche space. There's not very many companies that do what you do. So I'm always curious when I see a company like that, who came up with the idea to solve that problem, start that company? Is there Is there a good story that goes with that?
Yeah. So our founder, Christian Kalen, he
Mhm.
is a lawyer by trade, born in Switzerland. And he came up with the idea that, many countries around the world were looking to improve their lifestyles for their citizens and obtain investments. And so, like in the 80s, tourism and trade in the Caribbean was their main source of income. But he was able to design and implement the very first citizenship by investment program with
Huh?
St. Kitts and Nevis in the 90s. And that was one of the company's landmark achievements. So since that time, we've kind of then built this advisory consulting branch that I am a part of today. And what it's kind of developed into what Henley and Partners does is helping individuals and families understand how different residency and citizenship options can fit into their broader global mobility and wealth planning strategies.
Okay. So you sound like you're in an advisory firm, but if I'm looking at it from the outside looking in, how would you classify yourself? Because it doesn't sound like you're a tax firm or a law firm. Is there a certain classification you would give yourself?
We're not a tax firm and we're not a law firm. We are consultants, advisors, and how I would classify it is we are investment migration advisors.
Okay.
So we do have in-house tax expertise, but when a client needs legal or tax advice in a particular jurisdiction, we work closely with those reputable local attorneys, tax advisors, and other professional advisors. Our main role is to understand what the client's objectives are, identify which jurisdictions and programs that may be appropriate for them and their family, and then kind of coordinate with the right professionals to execute that overall strategy.
Awesome. And how many offices do you have worldwide, and how many staff?
Yeah. So there's 70 offices around the world, and we have a global team of several hundred professionals. That global footprint is important because residence and citizenship planning is inherently international. So our clients may live in one country, have businesses in another, investments in several others, and be considering a future home somewhere else entirely. So having people on the ground is super important and usually gives our clients that safety net, that feeling of comfort that we're not just going online and looking up people. We have those partnerships and that deep international network.
Absolutely. I think I can't overstate enough how important that is. I mean, these are significant investments that people are making. These are life-changing decisions, and I think that that's very, very important that you have that network set up, boots in the ground. So you kind of already mentioned this, but in your situation, if I were to come to you and say, "Hey, look, I want to refer a client, but I'm not sure they're a good fit," what would you just tell me back as far as what your typical client profile would look like? Like, is there one specific type of model client that you're looking for? Are there different versions? Is it all over the scale?
Yeah, so typically our clients do tend to be high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals, right?
Okay.
Because this is by an investment program. They're usually either entrepreneurs, international business people, or just globally minded, right? But doesn't mean we are turning away individuals that want to seek a second residency or citizenship for whatever reason they may be wanting to. But our main business is by investment, and we
Mhm.
do citizenship by ancestry and whatnot. So there is costs associated with these programs.
Right. So there'd be both an outlay for your fees to kind of help them work through the program, and then obviously, if they're making that residency or citizenship by investment, whatever it is, there's fees that they have to pay that jurisdiction as well on top of that are quite substantial.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's usually either an investment portion where you're investing in real estate into a fund or a contribution. And each country has different setups for how they do it. They may have all three options. They may have one or two. It really just depends on each program that our clients are then choosing to go forward with.
Okay. All right. And you alluded to this at the genesis story of your founder. But current day, is your company still helping foreign governments set up their citizenship and residency by investment programs? Are you still consulting with a lot of governments on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Henley Partners has advised governments on more than 20 different mandates. Our government advisory practice helps governments to design, implement, and then promote those investment migration programs that attract that foreign direct investment while we help them establish the appropriate regulatory and due diligence frameworks for those
Awesome.
programs. Yeah.
Yeah. So given that background, then, I mean, it just feels like you know the ins and outs. If you've helped set the stuff up, I always tell people, once you've analyzed it and you've set it up, I mean, for example, at the Wolf Group, we've analyzed foreign pensions for international organizations, the workings of those, help set those up. Once you kind of get those off the ground, that knowledge base that you have is just tremendous. I mean, because you can then apply that across board to a lot of other things. So that's really interesting. Okay, let's shift to a different topic because we just talked about Henley and kind of what's going on with Henley. Let's
Sure.
go into, I think, why a lot of people would be listening to this program. Let's talk about U.S. people. We're going to get to global people. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you guys out. But right now, let's focus on U.S. people. A lot of U.S. people, I know a lot of them. Some of them are actually my friends. Some of them I know very well, and a lot of them are clients. But they are looking at outbound migration options. What I mean by that is they're looking for second and third citizenships. They're looking for second and third passports. They may not necessarily want to be moving to a foreign country, but they want to have the flexibility of it. They're interested for residency by investment. So let's talk about the first topic there, which is that the United States has really changed a lot in the last couple of years. And, I'm spitballing and telling you what I'm seeing from my practice, which is a small practice. It's not a big one. Can you give me your perspective of the outbound migration movements of U.S. people as you're seeing it right now here in 2026?
Yeah, sure. So I really think there's really two different stories that are happening simultaneously.
Okay.
So first of all, on the inbound side, the United States continues to be an extraordinary magnet for global wealth. The depth of the American capital markets, technology and innovation ecosystem, and the strength of the U.S.'s legal and financial infrastructure continue to attract significant international capital, while at the same time, there is a growing number of Americans looking outward. And it's actually been doubling every year for the last 5 years, really since COVID. There's been a 1,000% increase over the last 5 years of Americans looking outbound, with that doubling happening each year, with not a single, not like one big influx at one time, right? So for many Americans, this isn't really about permanently leaving the United States. They're obtaining a second residency or citizenship because they want that optionality and that diversification. They want the ability to spend more time in Europe, have an alternative place for their children to live or study, diversify their family's geographic exposure, or simply just have another option available if their circumstances change here in the US. And Henley and Partners' own inquiry and application trends directly reflect that. The United States has been our largest source for outbound residence and citizenship applications since 2023. And what's particularly interesting is that the demand is overwhelmingly coming from Americans who are actually living in the US rather than foreign nationals that are residing here.
Okay, that's super interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, to be real honest with you, just by everything that that comes across at the Wolf Group, because we do a lot of exit tax planning. But that's I mean, the numbers don't lie. So, what are the top 3 countries that you're seeing U.S. people wanting to be resident or citizen of?
Yeah, so the demand there it's quite geographically diverse, but Europe is particularly significant. So nearly half of all applications from U.S. nationals have been directed toward European programs, while Latin America and the Caribbean also account for a substantial portion of that. But I think the more important takeaway is why Americans are looking at these destinations.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not really saying, I want to leave America. They're really saying, I just want more options. And I think that's a very different mindset.
Okay. But in general, are we seeing in Europe, the big three that always stand out in my head are, and we've heard these to the nth degree, the Portugal with the golden visa, Italy with the 200K program, Spain, to a certain extent. Are those the normal inquiry channels, or am I missing one of the countries that is getting a lot of? I just had a very good practitioner from Malta on the podcast, and he was talking about that being kind of an entry point that then gets you to those countries very easily. Is that the normal milieu, or is there something different there?
Yeah, so Malta is very important, right? So Malta is one of a few countries that in Europe that actually have a direct path to citizenship. Mm-hmm. Most European countries are a direct path to residency. Right. And so the difference there is that residency gives you access to that one country, right? You're not getting a travel document. You're not getting a passport. You just have that residency permit to that one country that you choose, right? Where then in Europe and in the EU, having citizenship is very important, right? If you get, for example, you get citizenship in Malta, you then have access to 27 different countries throughout the Schengen area to go live, work, and study for you and your family. So Malta is a very important aspect of that planning strategy. And what we really see is that for our ultra high net worth individuals, they're looking at more than one at one time, right? So they may get citizenship in Malta. While they're doing that and working on that, we can get them a Caribbean passport, which you can get in about 6 months. And then they'll look to be truly geographically diverse. They'll look towards New Zealand, right? So they'll have their U.S. passport. They'll have a Caribbean passport. They'll get either residency or citizenship in Europe, and then residency in New Zealand as well, to not only diversify where they can live, but also diversify their assets as well.
Yeah, and I think we talked, in previous conversations, you and I have talked about the tax tail doesn't always wag the dog in some of these situations. There are some countries that people are looking for because they want certain levels of stability based on various factors. So I think you mentioned New Zealand was a good one, maybe Canada, some of the countries in Latin America. So it sounds like, and you're bringing up a whole other level in my head, because now we're moving from just focusing on one country to a variety of different countries for a variety of different reasons. And so are you seeing a big trend in that direction as well?
Yeah. So again, I think the demand is very geographically diverse. And a category I think that may deserve a little bit more attention is what we call climate resilient or long-term stability destinations. So like New Zealand, Switzerland, parts of Canada. Those are really interesting because they're not necessarily low tax jurisdictions. They appeal to something different where there's strong governance, there's political stability, there's energy and food security, mature healthcare systems. And then for some families, that's becoming an increasingly part of their long-term planning. Okay. Generally, like we do generally hear about the very popular countries that kind of created this trend, like Portugal, Greece, Italy. They're all great programs, and those are generally residency routes, but could lead to citizenship if you do end up spending significant time there for 7 to 10 years, right? Depends on each country and their program. So, but there's also Latin America as well, right? Where Panama, Uruguay, Costa Rica, those that are closer to America, easier for people to get to, right? Those are becoming very useful tools as well.
Interesting. So would you So I had a question for you. Maybe it's the wrong question, but one of the questions I had was, were there certain countries that are sleeper countries that we're not, no one's really aware of, but probably should be or should have that, kind of on your list of potential options? And that question popped up to me because I had a meeting with a client in Austria recently, and I think he came down from Slovenia. And he was telling me about I think Slovenia has a residency or maybe citizenship. I forget which one it was. And he was like, yeah, it's really easy. This is what you do. And I just hadn't even thought about that being an option. So would you list some of those countries that you just named on the sleeper list, quote unquote? Are there any others that you put on there?
Yeah. So right. Like I wouldn't call them sleepers, right? Because it always depends on the individual and their family, what they are hoping to accomplish, right? But some that may be not as well known are countries like Panama, where you have that great access between Central and South America with a very built up financial market, right? Uruguay is becoming very popular as well. And then Costa Rica for a lot of our retirees as well. They have a great, like Panama and Costa Rica have pensionado programs that you can go through. They are great access points and beautiful places to live. So it is, those may be some of the quote unquote sleeper countries that we tend to talk about.
Nice. I got you locked in on that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Last question on this topic, and then we're going to talk about just global migration for everybody. What are the most common issues that you see U.S. people facing when they're doing, this all sounds great in theory, right? Go get your citizenship in one of these countries or residency in one of these countries and do these steps. But practically speaking, when you get in the reality of it and you get going on the train, what are some roadblocks that people run into? What are some common things that you're seeing that get people tripped up?
Yeah. So the biggest misconception here is that obtaining a residence or citizenship is simply a matter of making an investment, right? That isn't that. There are questions around tax residency, reporting obligations, source of funds, due diligence, your family's eligibility, physical presence requirements, your inheritance and estate tax planning, and how that new status interacts with that person's existing obligations. And so for Americans in particular, like acquiring another citizenship does not eliminate their U.S. citizenship or their U.S. tax obligations, right? So that's why we encourage clients to think about the entire strategy before really making that application or that decision.
Okay, interesting. And from my viewpoint, what I would always tell people, just from the tax perspective, is that, for example, coming inbound into the U.S., pre-immigration tax planning, when done correctly, is super powerful. I can make mountains move. I can make magic happen. It's one of the few areas that I tell people that things can really, amount to a very big ROI. But most of the time in practice, what we see is that people enter the U.S., they're not alerted to the issues, and they get 2 or 3 years down the line of non-compliance or misreporting, and then it's a big cleanup process, and it becomes a big issue. And outbound, I think, probably the same way too. So my takeaway from that is that there is a lot of additional planning. You shouldn't oversimplify the steps you need to make the transition or to make the investment or do whatever it is. You should really make sure you get your ducks in a row and do your planning. Okay, let's go into. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I was agreeing there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. Let's talk about the rest of the world. So when COVID hit, I talked to a lot of different people. I mean, it was, sitting around all day doing 20, 30 phone calls on Zoom a day. And, a lot of people got a little stir crazy and felt landlocked. And so I had one client tell me, because we were talking about, different avenues, and I brought up, renouncing, I think, a green card or something. And client told me, he said, "Hey, that's not the name of the game. The name of the game is getting as many passports as possible right now." And I was kind of floored. I was like, "Really? Tell me about that." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to get my U.S. citizenship, and then I'm going to get this one and that one. I want to have maximum flexibility." And we've kind of alluded to this in the conversation that we were having right now. But is that still the mindset that you're seeing from a lot of people that are coming to you, that they want more passports, not less?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think that the conversation has evolved a little bit, right? So COVID was a catalyst. It demonstrated to wealthy families that mobility could disappear very quickly, and that geographic concentration could create these real vulnerabilities for them and their families. So today we're kind of seeing a more sophisticated version of that thinking. Families are increasingly thinking of terms of what you could call a sovereign portfolio. So instead of relying entirely on one country for their residence, their business operations, education, lifestyle, and then future security, they're looking at how these different jurisdictions can provide different forms of optionality, right? So it's not necessarily about having 5 passports. It's about deliberately building that flexibility into that family's long-term plan.
That's super interesting. That's the theme that I still get to this day here in 2026. Okay, so we talked about the three countries that most U.S. people are looking to go into. Is there a different version of the top three for everybody else that's non-U.S. maybe? Are they, so if I'm European, I already have access to Europe. Where would I be looking to? Or if I'm in New Zealand and maybe I don't want to go to the U.S., but I'm looking to go to get other countries or citizenships, where would I be looking to?
Yeah. So there really isn't one universal answer because the motivations are going to be different depending on where that client comes from. So like you said, Italy is an interesting example. Its tax regime has attracted significant attention from internationally mobile individuals, particularly following the changes from the UK's non-dom regime. Greece and Switzerland also remain attractive European destinations for different reasons. But outside of Europe, the UAE has become a major destination for globally mobile wealth, while Saudi Arabia is also increasingly interesting because of its economic transformation and its Vision 2030 strategy. Yeah, that very important piece of the puzzle there. And then in Asia, Singapore continues to be one of the world's premier destinations for international wealth. Although its family office and investment requirements have become a bit more selective there. Japan and Thailand are also attracting attention for different reasons. So the broader trend is that wealthy families are considering a much wider range of jurisdictions than maybe they were a decade ago.
Yeah, I know that I think Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia are really trying to compete heavily with Singapore. I mean, the theme there is that a lot of the folks from those countries want to go to Singapore, and what they're trying to do is trying to really bring people to their jurisdiction. So I've heard that several times. What take do you have for people that maybe need short-term planning? So, for example, I've been talking to a lot of retirees from different international organizations. We serve a lot of the international organizations in DC, World Bank, IMF, IDB, so forth. And, sometimes we talk about, no one wants to go to the UK because the UK's tax regime has gone a little crazy, but they do have this 4-year repatriation window where you're only taxable on UK source income. And it's for those folks that haven't quite made up their mind where they want to go to long term. We've talked about, okay, do you go to the UK for 2 or 3 years, draw down on your World Bank pension or whatever it is, kind of wait and see what's happening in the world with these different programs, and then maybe make the leap from there. We've also seen a lot of digital nomads, people that, Mish, I want to spend 3 months in Italy, 3 months in France, 3 months here, whatever it is. How do I do that? How do I not become a tax resident? How do I get, the digital nomad visas? Do you deal with short-term planning like that? Have you seen a lot of that, or what's your take on that?
Yeah. So in fact, I think it's one of the most important parts of our conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So residence planning shouldn't necessarily be viewed as a permanent decision. The client's circumstances can change significantly in a short period of time, whether that be a few months, 5, 10, or 15 years, right? Children can grow older, businesses change, tax regimes are going to change, geopolitical circumstances are going to change. So we often look at the client's objectives and stages. So, for example, someone may want to establish residence in one country for a particular period because of its tax or lifestyle environment, being a digital nomad, right? While maintaining that flexibility to then reassess later. So spending several months in different countries might sound simple, right? But from a tax and legal perspective, it can become a bit more complicated. Mm-hmm. So typically this will depend on the individual when we explore that second residency or citizenship, when there is a tax play to be considered. We can explore different tax programs like Italy or Greece. And then especially for those wealthy digital nomads, we are aware of these different programs that we can discuss with them every few years if needed.
Got it. Okay. Last couple questions here for you. So let's shift back to the US for a second. You mentioned earlier at the beginning that the United States was still one of the top places for people to go to. Has that been the trend? Maybe that's just the trend now, but has that been the trend for the last couple of years? If we go back to 24, 23, has the U.S. still been one of the top places for folks to go to, or is that just something that has recently rebounded? Do you see any decline there?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. I think again, both stories are happening simultaneously. If you read our private wealth migration report, our head of the Americas put a nice piece together where we're still seeing a large attraction of internationally mobile wealth, especially from the billionaire status coming to the U.S., while millionaires in America are starting to look elsewhere.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's still the depths of the U.S. capital markets. It's the technology sector, leadership in such areas as AI, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, then the rule of law. I mean, it creates this compelling proposition for international wealth. So I don't really think it's fully accurate to characterize it simply as wealth leaving America. It's a little more nuanced than that, where it continues to go both ways.
I see. Okay. And I think what we want to do is we want to make sure we get a link for all the folks at home to those reports, or the report that you specifically mentioned. Let's make sure we get that into the show notes. Absolutely. So that everyone, those reports that Henley and Partners puts out are fantastic. And I advise folks to really look at the treasure trove of data that they have on this stuff. Last specific question that I have, and this is more of a toss-up question here. And certainly if you don't have any thoughts on it, don't worry about it. But you have any thoughts at all on that U.S. gold card, platinum card offering that was put out there? Has anyone inquired about that? I've had 4 or 5 inquiries on those different cards, and nothing really serious. Have you guys had a lot of inquiries about that?
Yeah. So what I'll say to this is that I think the broader concept is interesting because it reflects the growing recognition that immigration and investment policy can be used as a tool for attracting global capital. Mm-hmm. But whenever a new program or proposal is announced, it's important to distinguish between a political announcement, a proposal, and what is an operational immigration program. So for clients, what ultimately matters is the actual legal framework, the eligibility requirements, the costs, what the processing looks like, the tax implications, and then how that program really interacts with existing U.S. immigration categories. So the EB-5 program is still very popular, as there will be changes to that shortly. But what I would say is I would encourage anyone considering any one of these options to wait for the details and get professional advice before making assumptions about what the program actually provides for them.
Yeah, I was very hopeful that we were going to get some tax details on, especially the platinum card. I know the gold card is basically a green card, but I believe that based off of what I saw in the draft bills for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that they were going to put something in there on it, and then at the last minute they chose not to, or it got removed. And I think to the detriment of those political announcements, because I think it could have been something interesting. But it doesn't give anyone any comfort if you don't have any rules that are specific about it, especially tax. And I think that they really could have done something there to make it more robust for people interested in those. Okay. Any other topics or advice that you think our listeners should take away from this conversation or should think about? Maybe, we're here at a little over the halfway point here in 2026. We're about to cruise into 2027. Anything you want to, raise up or make aware for our listeners?
Yeah, I would encourage people to start the conversation earlier. The residence and citizenship planning can be much more effective when it's proactive rather than reactive, right? If you're already facing a liquidity event, a family situation, political uncertainty, a tax change coming down the line, or you need to relocate quickly for whatever reason, your options can be a little bit more limited. So the best time to really start exploring these strategies is when you don't urgently need them. And I would also encourage people to think beyond the passport itself. The real question isn't really, how do I get another passport? It's, what do I want my family's global mobility strategy to look like over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years? And that's where that planning becomes much more interesting.
Well, Chris, I got to say, you've unlocked for me some new thinking about my own personal family, because we've thought about, Malta, but I'd never really even considered Panama or Uruguay. I've been to Uruguay. I love Uruguay. So those are things that are now percolating in my head. You've put some inception in my head with those kind of things. So I've got some great personal takeaways from here. And then your last comment about the runway, I can't stress that enough. I always tell people, if you come to me and you're like, hey, I've got 6 weeks to plan this. My name is Mishkin Santa. My name's not MacGyver. I can't make I can't make magic out of nothing. I need time to think it through, to really give you a really great outcome. And I would echo the sentiments there. You need a good runway to plan it out, to make sure it's done properly. And I don't think it's ever too early to start that process. So word to the wise, start the process as soon as possible. These things take time. Outbound planning takes time. Pre-immigration planning takes time. All the paperwork, thought, consideration that you'd be doing with, say, Henley Partners, that obviously is going to take time. Okay, last question, and then I'm going to let you go. So folks have listened to this podcast, and let's say that they want to talk to you. They want to talk to someone at Henley Partners in their local country or the country they want to go to. How does that work? Do you guys charge for a consultation? How do they reach out to you? How do they find you? And obviously we will link your website and your contact details in the show notes, but give our folks the 30-second outbound elevator speech.
Yeah, so the best way is to reach out to me directly. I'm here based in Washington, D.C. I work with individuals, families, and professional advisors who are interested in exploring that global residence and citizenship planning. But to their point, the conversation really starts with a no obligation consultation, right? So we will strategize and advise with you on what the best option is for you and your family up front. And then we do due diligence on you. You pass our due diligence. It's then at that point, we're ready to move forward. We'll send over the client service agreement and an invoice for a retainer. But that first conversation is really about understanding what someone is trying to accomplish. Maybe what they're interested in, where they're interested in spending more time, giving their children additional options, diversifying where their family can live, or simply creating a contingency plan, or what we call a plan B for their future. And from there, I can walk them through the options that may be relevant to their circumstances. And then when it's appropriate, bring in our colleagues, our specialists from around the world to go deeper into the legal, tax, investment, or program-specific considerations. So if you've been thinking about it, and even if you're early in the process, I'm always happy to have an initial conversation. You don't necessarily need to know which country or program you're interested in before reaching out. That's really what I'm here to help with.
And I would tell people, maybe don't, lock yourself in so hard. Maybe have that, if you just know that you're interested in it, that may be enough. And then you can you can call Chris and Chris can give you the various options. I think that's fantastic. Well, you've heard it here, everybody. There it is, Henley & Partners. Chris, you've been fantastic. We've enjoyed having you on the podcast today. We learned a lot. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Mishkin. I really appreciate it.
You've been tuning in to the Essential Tax Podcast with your host, Mishkin Santa. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, thewolfgroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.